We would like to thank DistroWatch for mirroring the Zoo Crew podcasts. DistroWatch, your one-stop solution for distributions and information. Please point your web browser to distrowatch.com and give them your support. All right, welcome to yet another fabulous Linux Zoo Crew. And today on the Zoo, you are watching episode 3 of Ubuntu Bootcamp. And this episode will focus on considerations you should make before installing Ubuntu on your computer. Now, before we begin today's discussion, I would like to share a few words with you from our founder of the Linux distro community, Voltam.
Hi, I'm Voltam, founder of the Linux distro community. The Linux distro community is a place for people to hang out and discuss Linux distros, software, and open source. The Linux distro community is a community funded by its members for its members. We are a friendly, welcoming community that encourages people who use Linux operating systems and software to share their passion and knowledge with other people. We believe that when people share information freely, everyone benefits. We'd love to see you become a part of the Linux distro community. You can voice chat with us on Mumble or text chat with us in IRC. Head over to linuxdistrocommunity.com for details. Join in today in the sharing of knowledge and the freedom that a Linux operating system gives people. Thank you.
All right, I got a special show for all of you today. Rather than doing this episode by myself, I figured I would bring in my panel of experts into the show, and we have a all-star cast here. We have LectroLinux, the host of the LectroLinux show. We have QUIDSUP, the quintessential Ubuntu user. He has all kinds of tutorials on his show focusing on updates, customizations, and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we have everybody's favorite dual booter, Total OS Today. He runs both Ubuntu and Windows on his computer systems. And then, of course, we have an everyday user on the show. We have Marcus, who uses Ubuntu as well. Welcome, all of you, to today's show. Now, everybody who has seen my last episode already knows that we've already covered ways that you can make bootable mediums for running Ubuntu on your computer without installing it. And I figured I would take this time to cover some key points that are necessary before you install Ubuntu, before going into that actual installation tutorial for you guys. And some of the things that I like to look at whenever I'm testing a Linux distribution is, does all of my hardware work? Will my Wi-Fi be able to access the internet? Are the graphics okay? Am I getting 3D acceleration? You know, little things like this are, also I like to look at what's in the software repositories. What kind of applications are available to me? And some other considerations that are out there. Well, if you're an avid gamer, Windows is a necessary evil. First, I'd like to pass the microphone over to Total OS Today. Please share with us some considerations you would recommend to people who are considering to try Ubuntu for the first time, possibly install it in their computers.
Well, I would say the very first consideration, Spatry, is to look for functional ATI drivers. Ha 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 ha. But no, I'm just kidding.
I remember you got quite angry at the ATI drivers, but interestingly enough, the stock Xorg drivers that ship with Ubuntu work quite well. I mean, that's what I'm using on my computer, and they provide excellent graphics acceleration. As a matter of fact, I've downloaded some games from the Humble Bundles, and they're running beautifully.
Cool, yeah, I would have to agree about the Xorg drivers. I haven't had any issues whatsoever. So, one of the first considerations I usually tell viewers of my channel, if you're going to try a Linux-based operating system such as Ubuntu or Linux Mint or Zorin, which I use occasionally, if you are going to install it as a dual booter, please back up everything first. Now, it's quite safe to install as a dual boot. The automatic GUI installer is pretty straightforward, and I would say it's probably 95% safe to install without any types of issues. But nothing is perfect. So if you are planning on installing as a dual boot and not erase everything, now if you are installing this on a clean computer and don't care, then that's a different issue altogether. But if you are going to install it as a dual boot, say alongside Windows 7, well, first I would defragment your hard drive and then back up. Now, one more point, a lot of new computers with Windows pre-installed will allow you at least my computer did, it will allow you to make backup disks of the operating system. And in my case, I made up backup DVDs of Windows 7 just in case something would happen installing Ubuntu. Well, nothing has happened, but nothing is perfect. So I would say, number one, defrag your system, make sure it's efficient and ready to go. Number two, back up everything. And then number three, install Ubuntu. You can download the ISO and burn it on the DVD disk, but sometimes you may run into like errors and stuff like that. I prefer booting off a USB stick.
Yes, and this was one point that I covered in my previous tutorial, where using a USB stick with a persistent file on it can be advantageous to you, because if you make any changes in the operating system, the next time you boot into it on the USB stick, you would be able to visually see those changes. And maybe there's some software that you would want to install from the Ubuntu Software Center. It would remember what you have installed and allow you to use that. So it's a great way to test it out before installing. QUIDSUP, I'd like to pass the microphone over to you at this point. Do you have any ideas or things that you would like to share with that potential newcomer to Linux? Some ideas, some things they would want to look out for?
Well, I would like to say that everything will work 100% and absolutely perfect. Trouble is, though, this is real world, and it's still quite a high number. It's still like over 90% working. I guess gaming could be an issue for a lot of people. We do know that Windows is king of gaming at the moment. We do expect things to change. We have got the Steam client coming out on Linux very soon. I think that old argument of gaming not being so good in Linux won't be so true anymore.
Okay, and we've also got some good suggestions here on IRC. For instance, GTO suggests that you can install Ubuntu in Windows like an application. Now, the only thing about that, using Wooby to install within Windows, you have to remember that you're not going to get the full performance, because obviously you have Windows running and then you have Linux running on top of it. Personally, I don't recommend that. While that is a good way for people to have a look at it and try it out, they're really not getting the full feel of what Ubuntu can do. So I have to say, yes, you could use that as an option, but still using a USB stick or even booting from a live CD or DVD would be a little bit more advantageous. I'd like to pass the microphone over to Lectro at this time.
Yeah, when it says Wooby, all it does is create a 30 gig maximum like virtual drive so you can dual boot. It's only so you can, it makes it so you dual boot. It's not within Windows. It basically creates it within the same hard drive. You don't have to partition it. You just put in username and password, install it, it does all the installation, then you reboot, and then you reboot straight into Linux, into Ubuntu or Mint or whichever Wooby you use. So you're running the full Linux without Windows on top. Then if you want to get rid of Linux, all you have to do is go into add or remove programs and do it that way. That's all it does. It makes dual booting a lot easier. It's not a program within Windows.
Now, let me ask you, Lectro, do you have the benefit of using an ext file system, or is it going to be using NTFS?
It uses an ext4 file system as default.
Okay, so they would be able to get an experience there. All right, then I was mistaken, because I have seen in the past where there were Linux distributions that would run on top of Windows, and the performance wasn't there, and maybe that's where the confusion there, at least for me, was. So remember, folks, as I've said in my first episode, I am not an expert on this. But the thing is, Armageddon in IRC tends to agree with me in that he feels that the performance is low using Wooby, and so by using a live medium, you're getting a better sampling of what you can come to expect when running a Linux distribution. And now I'm going to pass the microphone over to Marcus Baird. He actually dual boots both Ubuntu and Windows. I'd like to hear your opinions.
Yeah, I do, but I mean, I have used that way before when I first tried it. It's an easy way to install Ubuntu. You don't have to do too much stuff, but dual booting is quite straightforward too, and I prefer it from a USB. I do have a laptop here, I have straight Linux on, but I tend to use that if I want to try a Linux distro, but I tend to keep Ubuntu on my desktop. just for personal use. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Spectre. It's, you don't get that great performance if you do it that way, but it is an easier way to do it if you don't know much about installing Ubuntu on a computer.
Now, something else, another consideration, you may want to check and see if any of your external peripherals are going to work when you're using a live medium to boot the system. For instance, you may have a printer hooked up to your USB interface, and you'll want to check and make sure that there's a driver so that you'll be able to print. You may have maybe an external hard drive, or you might even have a TV capture device like I have that I just plug in to a USB port, and then by downloading TV Time, be able to access it and be able to use it. These are little things that you're going to want to check out first before actually installing on the computer. And the nice thing is you can get a lot of support from the Ubuntu forums. This is actually how I learned how to use Linux. I wasn't sitting around in an IRC room. I actually dug around quite a bit online. Google is your friend. What say you, Total OS today?
I would have to totally agree about the forums and Google and trying to find out information whether something will work. Say you installed Ubuntu, maybe your current printer doesn't work and need to find drivers on how to install it. Definitely doing the search and going on the forums. That's how I get most of my answers, unless I take the time to figure it out on my own. But I don't usually have the patience for that. But yeah, I would have to agree about the forums and Google searching.
And that's something I kind of have to make a concession here, because there are so many different printers out there on the market, and I know a number of people are going to be asking me, well, how do I get printer X working on this system? And to be honest with you, I don't know if it would work. Now, I do know that HP printers generally have good support. Kodak is hit or miss, but the thing is there are community drivers that are out there, and I've actually been able to get my Kodak printer working. But there are so many different models and makes of printers out there, it's going to be kind of hard to do a tutorial on setting up a printer. But the thing is, nonetheless, I'm still going to do a show on finding out and getting information on getting that particular printer working. What say you, QUIDSUP?
Yeah, with printers, I have not owned a printer now for over 5 years. I suppose my advice, though, on trying them out, you can run the Ubuntu off live CD first off, and you can generally try out your hardware from there, and it'll either work straight away or it won't. If it doesn't, my favourite trick for finding out the solution with how to get hardware working in Linux is just put it on Google. You put the name of the device, then Linux, or the name of the device, and Ubuntu, and the common item, odds are you'll pick up a search result and get the answer within quite a short time.
Absolutely. Electro, you have an opinion.
Yep, I found that the HP printers work better because the HP tools that they brought out for Linux. My friend has a HP wireless printer, and all they had to do was install the HP toolkit, and it networked a wireless printer up, and it was just like running it on Windows. It was so simple. She just had to collect it, choose which printer she wanted on a wireless network, hit print, and it was just like printing on Windows. But like you said, try it on a live CD. Find out online. You don't even need to run Linux in a live CD to look on Google to see if your printer's supported. But they should really just bring a website out that says, is my printer compatible with Linux? And then you type in your printer model and it'll tell you there and then.
Very well put. Marcus, do you have any input on this?
I have an HP printer and never had an issue with it. It works straight out of the box on Ubuntu. I don't even think I had to install a driver at all. So, as far as HP is concerned, they definitely work.
Now, a lot of people, as an option, will consider maybe using virtualization to try out Linux. Now, many distributions out there really do not give great out-of-the-box support in VirtualBox, and Ubuntu is one of them. I know that in order to really get the full experience, I have to install Ubuntu in VirtualBox, but that is an option for some of you out there who would rather just run this in a virtual machine. But then again, you're still not getting the full performance because you're running an operating system on top as a guest on top of a host. But the thing is, it is a good way to have a look and see how well things are going to perform, and just to see if this is going to suit your needs. Is the Office software going to be working well enough for you? Is there a good selection of software for you to get your jobs done? And So these are things you'll want to look at. But let's talk about other things that you may not see working out of the box. For instance, when you first run Ubuntu from a live medium, one thing you can do is press the Ubuntu icon in the upper left corner of the screen, which opens up the dash. And then from there, just type in drivers, and you will see an icon for proprietary drivers. And I forget what that one is titled now. It's on the tip of my tongue. But at any rate, you click on that icon, and then it will let you know if you are using any proprietary hardware. This could be useful for some of you who may be using a Broadcom interface. And the Broadcoms, especially those ship on Dells, and you have to install that driver just to be able to get internet access. This is another reason why having a USB stick could come in handy when testing that. So you definitely want to check out the driver section on there to see if there are any drivers that can be downloaded from the repositories so that you can get the most out of the system. What do you think about that, Total West, today?
Yeah, I would have to agree. You mentioned about printers. For myself, over the years, printers are a hit and miss as far as getting drivers or getting the drivers to work properly. I would have to say right now it's a little bit better in Windows to run, drivers that work properly with printers. But you know what? I will still say that 90% of the time you're probably not going to have any problems, but definitely check the repositories, not the suppositories. Check the repositories, folks, to get any updated software. And as far as printers go, sometimes checking the manufacturer, like HP or Canon, they may have something on there also.
Yeah, very, very good point. But this is a great time when you're testing with a live medium that you can check and make sure that all of these things are going to be working to your satisfaction. Another thing that could be a deal breaker for some people is, well, right out of the box, you're not going to be able to play DVDs. But there are repositories that you can install which will allow you to download the necessary libraries so that you can get those to open. It's not hard to do at all, and I'm actually going to have a series on that after we install Ubuntu in this bootcamp series. I'm going to cover a number of things you're going to want to do after installation, such as cleaning up. We're going to cover, making sure that you have all the codecs necessary for playing all of your media files. We're even going to cover running some of your Windows applications within Ubuntu as well. So, there's a lot of material that this series is going to cover. What say you, QUIDSUP?
Sorry, was the question about the DVDs and the media?
Exactly.
Yeah, we've actually got a lot of the codecs installed. There is a simple little tick option during the install, and that gives you most of what you'll need. Just the one little one that isn't there is the DVDs, but that is it's very easy. It's just one line in the terminal. I've done a video on that, and there's even a page in the Ubuntu Wikipedia page about that as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a demonstration of how to install that both graphically or through the command line. I know a number of people who are new to Linux, really might find the terminal to be a little intimidating. And that was a good suggestion made by Alan Pope on our last podcast that we definitely have a look into that. But also, Armageddon did suggest that if you install the VLC media player, that issue becomes moot, because then VLC will pretty much play just about any media file that you can think of. What is your point of view on this, Electro?
Yeah, it's all good apart from when I install restricted drivers. Obviously, Pope was mentioning about the NVIDIA drivers, but mine don't install when I tick that option on installation. You say that VLC will play, but it won't play encrypted DVDs or Blu-rays, as in Blu-rays that you'll get from like LoveFilm or whichever. Ubuntu is being really designed to be everything that you need out the bat, except restricted stuff that they can't give you for free unless you bought it as part of a system. It'll cost licensing and stuff. But if Ubuntu finds a way, then they'll obviously do it. But like you mentioned in the last Zucrew that you was going to talk about, which we forgot about, was about when Ubuntu is now changing from CD to DVD media because the file size is getting a bit too big. Hopefully when they make it into a DVD size from all the latest Ubuntus, they'll be able to fit a lot more in by default, so you don't have to go installing like the latest versions of every other package.
Marcus.
Yeah, as far as codecs and stuff is concerned, all you have to do is tick that box and installs most third-party stuff. I find music is actually quite good in Ubuntu. I find the sound's actually quite okay as well. And as everyone's been saying, 2BRC does play most things. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have too many issues with Ubuntu as far as codecs, etc. You can install Ubuntu. What's it called? The codecs, and I can't remember what it's called now. But there are codecs that you can install from the Ubuntu Software Center, and gets everything working pretty well.
Now, some points that some of my listeners have made while we were having this discussion is, for instance, Riley mentioned that VLC won't play encrypted DVDs by default. However, QUIDSUP did mention that Handbrake uses the DCSS library to rip DVDs. So I imagine that if you do install Handbrake, then it probably would install the needed library. Would you say that's a correct assessment, QUIDSUP?
No, it isn't actually. No, you do have to still run the terminal line to get it to do the ripping.
Okay, so the thing is, you will definitely need to install that additional library, and that is something that I will definitely be covering in this series, because I mean that could be a deal breaker for some people. Okay, at this point, I think we've covered everything that I could think of. For considerations before installing Ubuntu, I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to TotalOS today and to the rest of the panel for any final thoughts.
I use Ubuntu 12.04 as a dual boot on my desktop along Windows 7. I love it. It works great. As far as brand new Windows Linux dual booters, if you want everything to work out of the box, you may want to consider also Linux Mint or Zorin, since I believe pretty much everything works out of the box. But Ubuntu is my #1 Linux distribution for myself, since I'm not a newbie anymore, but definitely give it a try. I find myself using Ubuntu with Unity more than I'd use Windows 7, if anything, because it just looks cool.
Lectro, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I first started off dual booting on Windows, and then just as I got used to using Ubuntu, I just slowly and quite progressively changed from dual booting to just using Linux altogether, and since then, which has been pretty much a year now, I ain't looked back. I mean, sometimes I do go back to Windows on dual boot time to time, but that's only for gaming because I have a high-end graphics card. But if it weren't for that, I just wouldn't use it altogether. I just stick with Linux. So make the plunge and it'd be worth the effort.
What say you, QUIDSUP?
Well, I've been using Ubuntu now as a single operating system for over 3 years. Never really looked back. Can't even remember what I'm missing in Windows. My period of dual booting with Windows was probably less than 2 weeks, I think it was in the end. And I just decided, well, at the time, Ubuntu 9.10 was a lot better than Windows. Well, it was Windows XP then. Never looked back from it, though.
Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, I use Linux full-time on my laptop, and it's normally a Ubuntu-based distro, whether it be Ubuntu. I like trying all the other Ubuntu-based distros, but I find I always go back to Ubuntu. I think it's one of the best ones out there as far as code, everything out of the box, and I recommend it to new users, definitely. I mean, if you don't like Unity, you can always install, or Ubuntu if you want. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, but if you like KDE, but yeah, definitely. There's nothing wrong with it.
And that's something else I will be covering later on in the series. For those who want to have a traditional desktop, I will show how to install different desktops and use those in Ubuntu as well. The nice thing about Ubuntu and Linux as a whole is the fact that it has really matured to a point where it is now desktop ready. And as you've heard from my panel members here, we really love Linux. It is really well worth your time to give it a try. But something else to really consider, Linux is not Windows. For many of you, you're going to have to unlearn a lot of the things that you've learned in Windows, because doing things in Linux is a little bit different. But the thing is, today, Linux is a lot easier to use. And the thing is, another nice thing about Linux is you can pretty much use it to surf the internet, keep in touch with family and friends, and we don't really consider viruses to be much of a threat to us anymore. We don't have to worry about all those nasty pop-ups, warning us that the computer is loaded with viruses, yada, 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 because, Windows viruses just don't have any domain over a Linux system. Well, this has been an invigorating conversation. I hope this has given all of you listeners out there some some food for thought. And I'd like to thank the following show hosts for being on the show. LectroLinux, thank you. Thank you, QUIDSUP, for appearing. Thank you, Total OS Today. All of these guys, I'll have links in the show notes so that you can check out their shows here on YouTube. Please watch and subscribe to their channels. They are well worth your time. And I'd also like to thank my contributor, Marcus Baird, for joining us on the panel today. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your opinions on this. And I'd like to thank everybody who participated on IRC in the chat room. And I'd like to thank everybody who's watching. Join us again next week here on the Linux Distro Community, Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for another wonderful Zoo Crew podcast. We will see you then. Ciao.
Today's show was brought to you by the Linux Distro Community. Visit us today at linuxdistrocommunity.com and chat with us on Mumble or in IRC on the Freenode Network in the Linux Distro Community channel. The Linux Distro Community. Freedom through the sharing of knowledge.